Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Federation Hall. Welcome in Zoom land. My name is David Sequeira and I am the director of the Fiona and Sydney Maya Gallery. I'm also the person who has the privilege of organising Art Forum for the Victorian College of the Arts. And before I introduce our guest speaker, I invite you all to ground yourself in the deep knowledge that you know, for many years, for many generations before the VCA was ever thought of, the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation practiced song and dance. They made paintings, shared stories, made sculptures. They practiced healing, they raised families, and these rituals and traditions continue today. And it's not, we don't take it lightly that we get to make art on country that's imbued with such a rich continuing history. And just for everybody, I'm coming to you from Gadigal and Bidjigal country in New South Wales. So a big shout out to First Nations people from all over the country, but especially from Gadigal, Bidjigal country and Bunurong Wurundjeri country. So everybody, please join me in acknowledging elders past, present and emerging. So our guest speaker today, Anida You Ali, is an artist, educator and global agitator born in Cambodia and raised in Chicago. Anida's artistic works span performance, installation, new media, public encounters and political agitation. Using an interdisciplinary approach to art making, her installation and performance works investigate the artistic, spiritual and political collisions of a hybrid transnational identity. Her works have been exhibited widely at the Haus der Kunst, Palais de Tokyo, Musée de Contemporain Lyon, Shangri-La Museum of Islamic Art, Culture and Design, Malay Heritage Centre, Bendigo Art Gallery, and the Queensland Art Gallery and Gallery of Modern Art. She is a collaborative partner with Studio Revolt, a trans-nomadic artist-run media lab whose controversial works on social issues have agitated the White House and garnered international awards. She's the recipient of the 2020 Art Matters Fellowship and the 2015 Sovereign Asian Art Prize. Anida serves as the Senior Artist in Residence at the University of Washington Bothell and works between the Asia-Pacific region and the United States. Wherever you are, please make our guest speaker, Anida You Ali, very, very welcome.
Assalamu alaikum. Jimriab Sua, Swasday, Swadika, hello, hola, bonjour, konnichiwa, wadamuli. I just learned that from Bindal Nation up in Goram Bilbara, from the elder Uncle Alfred Smallwood. My name is Anida You Ali, and as David has mentioned, I am an artist, educator, and self-proclaimed global agitator. Though I don't know if you're going to really hear much about some of the controversies in this talk, because I am spreading my talks over 4 talks in Melbourne. But in Noord's class tonight, you will hear about the controversies and how I've navigated those institutional terrain. I am of mixed heritage, Thai, Malay, Khmer, Cham, and American, living in diaspora and currently residing in Tacoma, Washington, in the States, in the US, home to the Puyallup tribe. I was born in Battambang, Cambodia, raised in Chicago, which is the traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe, or the Council of the Three Fires. And this fire you'll see pop up, it's the Ojibwe, Odawa, and the Potawatomi nations. I have no birth certificate. I hold an American passport and a K-1 visa in Cambodia. I work between the US and the Asia Pacific region. I am a Cambodian diasporic artist. Astrologically, I am a Sagittarius, fire sign. I am mother to 3 daughters, none of whom are fire signs, and wife to a Japanese filmmaker who is also not a fire sign. And our family is both Buddhist and Muslim. I tend to start with giving some love to Farm Lab and artist Lauren Bond in LA, who created this large neon sign, which is a quotation from Sherry Rabinowitz. And it says, artists need to create on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy. And in my history, my family history, my personal history, I have dealt with a lot of destruction. In my own artistic work, I have faced a lot of destruction. So to give you context, between 1975 and 79, 1/5 of the Cambodian population was killed. 90% of artists were killed under the Khmer Rouge, and Jam Muslims, my family, was targeted for extermination by the Khmer Rouge regime. The Jam Muslims, an ethnic minority, suffered the biggest death toll overall, around 100,000 Jam out of a total population of 250,000 died in the genocide. That's 50% of the Jam Muslim population reduced after 1975. I'm going to take it to 1979. This is where we begin. A refugee camp between the border of Thailand and Cambodia, a camp whose name I do not know. And we begin here in the in-between. We begin with these photographs. These are the only images that I have of myself, artifacts from a traumatic period in my family's history. These images are the closest things to owning my baby photos, except here I am not a baby. I'm about 5 years old, maybe 4.5. I am a redhead scorched from the 79 sun. And maybe you could take a second to guess which picture in these photographs is me. I already gave you the clue. And you are right if you guess that I am pictured to the right of a box, a care package from our Thai family who found us after they received word that some of us may have survived the Khmer Rouge brutality. And this is me, the boyish little girl with the fire-scorched hair, kind of touching the care package and looking directly into the camera, at the camera, yet beyond. I want to take it to 1975. This is a significant year for my family and would change the course of my life forever, affecting multiple generations of my family. In 1975, I was 1.5 years, too young to remember the atrocities I would experience from that point on. And to put it into context, in 1975, the film Jaws was released in American theaters. In 1975, the Japanese electronic company Sony released Betamax, the video cassette recording system. In 1975, the UK votes to join the EU. In 1975, the boxer Muhammad Ali beats Joe Frazier in the famous match, The Thriller in Manila, held in the Philippines. In 1975, the 15-year civil war in Lebanon begins between the Christians and Muslims. Here, in 1975, Australia had a constitutional crisis known as the dismissal. And in 1975, Pink Floyd's Wish You Were Here is the best-selling album in Australia. And in 1975, Australia also passes the Racial Discrimination Act of 1975. In my personal family history, 1975, April 17th, 1975, the Khmer Rouge, a Cambodian communist regime, takes control of Cambodia and marches into the capital city of Phnom Penh. And it was the year everything changed and displaced 1 million refugees, many to America, some to Australia, others to France, Canada, New Zealand. In 1975, Saigon would also fall to the communist North Vietnam, and ultimately America and the South Vietnamese forces would lose the war. And in 1975, the Muslim population in Cambodia, which was 5%, would drop down to 2.5%. 1975 is also the name of the 2013 exhibition in New York City that featured my camp series of images mentioned earlier. In the series, I silkscreen a total of 4 photos from this archival collection that my family has, these baby photos of myself, onto fabric and proceeded to stitch and embroider barbed wire patterns onto the surface of the images. But for me, this work failed. It failed because I was trying to be a visual artist, and I am not. I am a performance artist, and this is where visual works fail for me. This work that I was trying to make as a visual piece lacked liveness or aliveness, and ultimately it's that exchange of energy that I desperately seek. So although I rely on a photo to extend a moment, it's the series of actions before and after that captured moment, which is my art. My medium is durational. My medium is performance. Growing up as an Asian, Muslim, refugee, diasporic American, I learned to perfect my English, speaking without the accent that marked my family as other and foreign. I had sharpened my verbal skills as a weapon, but when I started to travel overseas in the early 2000s to share my spoken poetry and very English-based storytelling about my traumas, and I would often speak about racism, misogyny, oppression, patriarchy, stereotypes, injustices, genocide, really anything that dehumanized my people and people of color in general. But my perfect English failed me when I brought my words overseas in the 2000s, in the early 2000s. Language failed me because people outside of America, including my fellow Cambodians, could not understand the nuance of my story or the craft in my verbal expression. People felt the energy and the passion of my performance, but they didn't have a clue as to what I was saying. And this really broke my heart as an artist. Even when the words were translated, there seemed to be a deep loss of the moment experienced. And it felt like the time to decolonize my practice and shift it to a form that felt more freeing and ultimately something that could transcend borders and languages. That this was the moment. In 2006, my work started to shift towards performance art, and that opened new worlds and unlocked my own imagination to possibilities. I often get asked the question of why performance, and then I tell people that for me, performance, it activates, it heals, it provokes, it triggers, it's immediate, it takes time, and beautifully, it happens anywhere, anytime, for anyone. And it makes you feel, it makes the audience feel something, and it makes me also feel something. I'm awake and I'm alive just as much as the active participants who are witnessing it. So for me, in my journey to this sort of nonverbal performance, it's really about the use of stillness and durational activity. It becomes a quest to extend my narrative into other spaces that I can't necessarily inhabit through translation. And in many ways, that live interaction and creating moments that become a story, that performance continues and extends itself further through my recount of the performance and my remembrance of people's range of reactions. It's almost as if the performance never ends, but much like some of my early lines in my poetry, when I'm talking autobiographically, I've used the line, "The journey never ends for the refugee." It's that seeking of home and belonging, the constant reminder of displacement. And my work has looked at performance not only as the body performing, but objects performing. And so this is one of a newer work, Hello, How Are You?, in which signage, in which language re-enters my world in 2018 as a large signage taking space outside of my own home. Instead of waiting for the permission, if those of you who are in public art, you know that it is a tremendous amount of work to get permission and to go through all the layers of liability and institutional layers to put the work out. And so instead of waiting for that, we decided to take down the fences around our house and instead put up this innocuous large sign that introduces us to the neighborhood as artists, as people, and as neighbors. Today, I want to talk about the themes in my work, loss and absence, the body as sight, activation through presence, my use of the public sphere, encounters, disruptions, body as content, the body, just as we pay our respects to elders past, present, and forthcoming, the body is that. The body is the past, the present, and the future. That is how powerful of a medium and instrument this body, especially with all the histories and identities that I hold, that I feel is the power in my medium. The other thing that I tend to do is the creation of mythical heroines and these mythical beings. It's an extension of my 2011 Fulbright research work in Cambodia, which was looking at contemporary creation mythologies. My Fulbright, by the way, was also a failure. I never fully completed it. I did finagle some paperwork to make it look like I did, but that is a result of also having to give birth to a second baby while on your Fulbright with already another baby and trying to, of course, be the overachieving artist scholar. And that maybe can be saved for another lecture, but I just wanted to put it out there that failures are very much a part of how I grow as an artist, how I learn, and how sometimes you let those failures simmer because they may surprise you later on, just like the creation mythology research would eventually pop up into many aspects of my current work. I'm also, as much trauma and war and destruction I hold, ultimately, I am trying to find beauty in the displacement. I want joy, I want color, I want humor, I want laughter. I want people to understand that there is not this monolithic, angry person of color image that people tend to project when you start to talk about politics or anything political. I want to trick people into difficult conversations sometimes, especially the dinner conversations that you're supposed to avoid, which everyone knows, or maybe not. I don't know if this is the same in Australia. In America, the two things you don't talk about at the dinner table, politics and religion. But if you know my work, you know that my work is absolutely this. And it is teasing and tricking people into these conversations using beauty and humor and the moment of displacement to draw people into it. So I'm absolutely aware that my work disrupts, it agitates, and I constantly reinvent, and that the photo extends the moment. I am very grateful to all the photographers and filmmakers who have been collaborators in my work, especially my lifelong partner, Masahiro Sugano, who has really been with me for a long time and is sort of the best collaborator and partner I could have because he knows me so intimately and artistically that the photos, in particular, the ones that he takes and the videos that he makes alongside me, really elevate my work even further, that the documentation becomes another set of artwork in and of itself, that it's not just documenting the work. It's been a long journey with performance and with the idea of encounters. And these are all little sketches, encounters that last a few moments, like trying to put this up in front of the Prime Minister's house and knowing that the police were going to come. So this is literally a 5-minute piece, and also because there was oncoming traffic. It ultimately became this 24-hour durational piece involving other artists, and it's the idea of inviting Cambodian artists to come outside of their studio, not hide in their studio and be under the impression that you had to work inside your studio and then reveal your precious work suddenly in a gallery to all the same people. There seemed to be this sort of mode of presentation that Cambodian artists were holding on to, that was introduced to them clearly by Western artists and curators who have influenced the Cambodian scene. So this was my attempt early in 2012 to get artists to come and have these private conversations with random public folks. This is, of course, also, you can see parallels and or inspiration from Marina Abramovich's The Artist is Present. But the flip of this is I've invited other artists, each one to sit for 1 hour each. They are the artists in white, cross-disciplinary in Cambodia, with the other seat being anyone who is randomly passing through the park to sit there. Now, I decided to do it this way because I was breastfeeding my baby, and there was no way I could sit for a 24-hour period, which was the initial concept that I proposed. And so this is, again, where you need to be creative, you need to pay attention to like where you are, and you need to be flexible and adapt. I mean, that is how at least I make work. My children have been part of my work. Here is another work from Fukuoka, part of my residency there. This is the white mother. And really, this was a response and an intervention to the challenges of motherhood that working mothers, working artist mothers in Japan were facing. And here is a larger than life persona of a woman dressed in white with the traditional Japanese bridal hat and a live baby. Now, this baby is also representing nationhood. This is a walking Japanese flag, because at the time, birth rates for Japanese people were at an all-time low. And based on my interview with working artist moms, they told me that they felt like every time they were in public spaces, that they were very aware that they should not take up so much space, as if they were a nuisance, even though they were carrying literally the weight of the entire nation in producing babies and people for the nation. So I just decided that through the interview, they were telling me, like, what are the different places that you don't feel comfortable with? And of course, they said museums, they said public transportation, they said in general, walking in the public. And then this is a treat. They didn't say this, but this is the ambassador to Cambodia. Very awkward moment. If you know my pieces, I don't talk. And so here I am with a live baby, my baby, sitting there as these two men are just dressed up in their suit and just not knowing what to do in this very awkward still moment. But this is the beauty of art, right? This is what the piece is about, is this discomfort that is happening. The 16 minutes is a piece that I choreographed with the moms, the volunteer moms who are part of my research. We did a walk with our babies. 16 minutes is the amount of time that Japanese men fathers spend on average with their children per day. And so that is the duration of this piece. And at the very end, after the women sort of intervene and take up this space back and forth in the museum in this public square that I've designated with masking tape, they say goodbye to their children, leaving their children there in the middle of the square for a very long, I would say 5 minutes of an ending. And you see each mother sort of tenderly leaving their baby. You see the babies crying, throwing a fit, and the room is really filled with that sort of tense air of babies crying, mothers sort of holding back their tear. It was a very, in my opinion, powerful moment for all the moms and I think the witnesses that were there. There are many other pieces that become responses. My Push series was a series, it started in Myanmar. It was a piece that I had changed. I initially was going to do something else, but an incident happened where another Myanmar male artist bullied in front of all the international guests female artists that were presenting on the history of performance art from a feminist perspective. And this person started to mansplain in front of everybody and basically tell the person presenting, who was a Burmese female artist, that she was wrong and she didn't know what she was talking about. And everybody sort of froze and we felt the aggressive energy. I felt like, I can't believe this is happening, but I can. It feels like, all the things that we have talked about and discussed in feminist circles in, various parts of the world. And so I changed my piece and decided to dress in Burmese clothes. Underneath are eggs taped to my body. And then I made only the men make a circle around me and I asked them to push me down. And the men were very involved and were very aggressive in trying to push me down. And I would, of course, in terms of the eggs, egg them on and say, come on, try, and because I have a self-defense background, I never fell down. I was bruised badly. I repeated this at a place in Trinity College where I was presenting my work as a visiting assistant professor in international studies. This is a highlight of my academic career, being pushed by the president of the Liberal Arts College. And ultimately, I made a line, 2 lines down the church pews, and people would try to push me as I proceeded to go down the line. This was done in response to 2015, in which there's a real, the Trump campaign was coming up and really working up a lot of the rhetoric against people of color, xenophobia, misogyny, racism. And the students at the time were really feeling this. This is the time that Black Lives Matter, the movement in America for Black empowerment and civil rights, really also hit a high. And so I became the sacrificial lamb in this piece. I took the push piece and then ultimately proceeded to the altar where I had 99 eggs. And I encouraged everybody to egg me, to literally throw an egg, and that the performance would not be over until all the eggs were done, were completed. So at that point, my body sort of became the receptor for people's aggression, for what, and I think that, I was deeply bruised, and there were other people that were very moved and just couldn't take seeing me take the punishment, that a few students started to just destroy the eggs on the side because they just could not sit through the trauma that was unfolding. So in general, I start to really consider textiles in my work. This is also another thread in the work. And it's this idea, right? Like, I come from the spoken word and the poetry, the written language background. That is what I sort of started this talk with, and the failures of that. And so for me, translating that into textile is really about allowing the skin to be a metaphor through the textiles and like inhabit these spaces instead of words inhabiting them. And so you see that shift start to take place in 2009 with a piece called Palimpsest for Generation 1.5, where I was still working with text, but then I have this cascading hair that goes over the wall, and it's based on a Maxine Hong Kingston memoir called Woman Warrior, where the myth of Fa Mulan is that before she goes into battle, her family etches her family names with scraping it, knifing it onto her back. Instead of doing that, I have fragments of my family story, the things that I can remember, and I have a scribe write it on my back, then try to erase it, but it's never fully erased. And the next layer of text goes on it, and it becomes stained, it becomes wiped away, it stains the dress, and then that is ultimately what is left behind in the installation. This idea of staining is something that continues with other pieces. I'm not going to talk about this one. And then I start to experiment with textiles, with color, with trying to find joy through color. And really, it's color theory, it's composition. There's nothing political about this work. And this is the freedom that I start to find in 2012 as I enter Cambodia. From away from America, away from the hyper-racialization of America, I have found a freedom to just experiment, to be an artist who can just work out some color theory ideas. Here, it is red fabric that I'm interested in taking through the urban composition of Phnom Penh, as well as the rural, sort of idyllic rice fields. And so what happens in this experimentation is that the wind starts to participate in the performance. The wind scoops up my piece of fabric and creates these stunning images that I would just play with the wind. And I had a photographer capture these different images, and only through, looking later on, I would find that the Naga, a mythical serpent of the region, resurfaces. And so those moments are interesting to me, as well as looking to just play with myself, play with photography on a different level. And then pieces like this, taking restrictive lines. I drew a black and white square out of duct tape, black duct tape against a white wall in my studio as part of this residency in 2012 in Cambodia. And I decided, well, what would happen if those black lines were put on an organic body and taken out into a more organic setting? And so that would be this Enter the Field series. Again, it was really about composition. It was about color theory, and it was about playing with something that was allowing me to let loose, to not be political, to not be tethered to identity politics and or anything autobiographical. Cambodia really allowed me that opportunity to almost realize that everything I had done in America were merely sketches, preparing me for the fact that when my 2 feet landed in Cambodia and would take residency for those 5 years, that the magic would happen. I was a prolific artist during that period and continue to be, but in that particular part of my journey, that was when things connected. And I think that that act of returning, I always say that I've been fortunate enough to return to Cambodia after 30 years of absence. And one of them is to realize the Buddhist Bug series. It's really very poetic for me to return as an adult to live and work in Cambodia for exactly 5 years, which is the same amount of time I had spent as a small child before my family fled. And those 5 years have been escaping me. Like, I have been trying to track down those memories, those moments, piece together that, and I never had that until like taking residency for 5 years as an adult, raising my family of 3 kids there, and now having new memories. So I think that is something that I think about a lot, and I've really come to realize another line in one of my early poems, and that is, we didn't choose to leave, the leaving chose us. And so when I rephrase it in that way, for me, my life makes more sense. So the Buddhist Bug is a really epic piece. It's also iconic, and it is, this photo I don't show a lot of, because this shows the intersection of my work with Studio Revolt, my collaborative media lab. These are all Khmer exiled Americans. These are young men. At the time, they were young men who committed felonies in America, and then they served their time in the prison system. And when they were released, they were deported to Cambodia. So you're looking at deported individuals who, if you met them on the streets of Cambodia, you would think they were American citizens, but they didn't have their citizenship. And so because of their felony, they were deported to a land that they did not know. And this image of displacement and a sort of permanent exile is an image that I'm starting with this Buddhist Bug series to kind of show you, even though this was one of the last images I took in July 2015 before moving back to the US. So the Buddhist Bug is a creation myth that is sprung from my interest in hybridity, transcendence, and otherness. With the Buddhist Bug series, it's about coming to terms with creating from a place of turmoil and empowerment in experiencing the diasporic dilemma. The diasporic dilemma is a kind of in-betweenness in which you're always moving from an insider outsider. You're sort of caught in between that. And this work is about creating from that place. The diasporic dilemma is the idea that our identities are in flux and that we are constantly fluctuating between insider, outsider, local, and foreign, that we don't always have a choice about those identities fluctuating, and that it kicks in different moments, especially when the diasporic body returns. So although I began conceiving the series in 2009, the work would not really take root until I physically landed and took residency in 2011. And it really was inspired by all my secret snapshots of Buddhist monks. When I first arrived in Southeast Asia, I was floored by the kind of orange that I saw in the landscape. And so I took these secret photos of monks on a beach, monks on a motorcycle, monks bathing in a waterfall. And it was also because I would arrive not knowing my full family history and the how much of an ethnic minority my family was until I saw the overwhelming Buddhism that was in the landscape. And so I hope that this is where you can really see that the form itself is about being surrounded by an overwhelming Buddhism, while the face and the overall appearance of Islamic modesty is modeled after the hijab. The Buddhist bug really is a fantastic saffron-colored creature. It's 100 meters long, and it's always wandering, right? It doesn't really know where the bug is going to arrive, and it just needs to keep going. It needs to occupy spaces. It is a hybrid creation that is both Buddhist and Muslim, and it is traversing the Cambodian, a very changing Cambodian landscape of both rural and urban setting. And as with all of my performance installation garments, they don't mean anything as installation pieces until it's activated by the body, by live performance. This component is very important in the work. And so what you're looking at are photographs through the journey of the Buddhist bug, and in personal moments that you won't know until I give you this contextualization. For example, this is my grandmother's land. Everyone in the neighborhood knows that. When I walked the land, they knew exactly who my grandmother was. But because we left, the land is now, it goes to someone else, even though historically, this was where my family took root. This is where they had babies for generations. This is a Muslim classroom in my birth village. This is my birth village, and this is what many of the women do to make a living, is make this special mudfish. And the very last portion of the Buddhist bug is the night series of work that showed at APT 8 and is still ongoing. And of course, as I said, the bug is all about live performance and engagement, and these the installation needs to come alive. And I think that children play a special component to it. Children really take on a curiosity and a wonder, which is what the work is about. And also it allows a lot of people who wouldn't normally enter the piece. There's something about the joy that the Buddhist bug offers to people who encounter the bug, or when I lock eyes on someone, they sort of, you know, really melt in that moment, and usually enough to enter the space with me. And there are many, many stories that I have behind the scenes, including this man in Malaysia who was just very stoic before locking eyes on him. And then we were able to have this moment. And I remember the galleryist saying to me that this man usually is just the hardest person to break. And I don't know what happened in that moment and what you did, but this was a really treasured moment for the galleryist to see this man sort of let loose in that moment. The bug is something that is a very large work that takes a lot of research. Research is a really important component. I visit sites. I look at images of, you know, different modes of vehicle. I have a very large amount of people who help me. As you can see, it is, excuse me, it is not something I can do guerrilla style like some of the other pieces. And finally, I want to end with the red chador. The red chador is another piece that that's an ongoing work that I am also known for, and it premiered at the Palais de Tokyo in 2015. I always joke, the legacy of French colonialism bred bureaucracy. This is what they left Cambodia, Vietnam, some other parts of Indochine with. And at the time, I was also looking at headlines and the very racist and Islamophobic situations that were happening in France, and the ways in which Muslims were depicted as savages And these headlines started me to think about, okay, I have this opportunity to do this commission in France. It's clear that I have to comment on two things: their legacy of colonialism and the effects in Cambodia, and the burqa ban in France. As someone who is not covered, not veiled, I do feel that I have the opportunity to speak about veiling and about covering and about standing in solidarity to my hijabi sisters. My own background, this is the telekung, this is what we wear for prayers, Malaysians and Indonesians. I also grew up with aunties and my mother, my grandmothers, who were joyful, who were happy to veil. It wasn't a burden. It wasn't oppressive. It was something they did by choice. It was something they were happy to do. It is something I am happy to do. If I want to do it, I should be able to do so. And so really the inspiration came from their joy of covering, with this idea that the French were going to ban the burqa because they want to liberate everyone. It's all veiled as really racist policies and Islamophobic policies. I'm also influenced by the religious aesthetics of Catholicism and the pageantry of Catholicism and science fiction, the Imperial Guards from Star Wars. So that is really the birth of the red chador. And to be honest, I was really caught between the color fuchsia and red, and ultimately I went with red. And the chador is the word that's more commonly used in terms of a more global imagination and understanding of this textile, this particular textile in relationship to the Muslim body. It's not as quick to understand the red telekung. So it's the red chador. Naming my pieces are important. And in 2015, the red chador premiered as an executor, as a woman who beheaded the baguette. Every hour on the hour for 12 hours, she made demands in French and English to the French people and allowed them 60 minutes to then meet the demands. And those demands were things like, bring 99 Muslims into the museum, bring me a strand of hair from Marie Antoinette's wig, bring me a flag from every former French colony, bring me a truckload of your best cheese. I want a private meeting with Inspector Clouseau and bring me the Pink Panther. I want all meals in all French schools to be halal. I want you to rename all the girls Fatima. They're ridiculous, right? They're absurdist. They're nearly impossible. But some were, if they were clever, which some people were, they could save their national symbol. I believe this is a UNESCO intangible world heritage. So I do believe I am now breaking laws by beheading the baguette. Believe me, there were many stares and horrific sighs during the moment when the baguette was beheaded. It's not about just being in the museums. It's always about being in the actual public spaces and intervening and being hyper present and hyper visible in the subway, on the streets. This work has been ongoing. I think that the worst comments have been in America about the work. I'll just give you some examples. Why is she looking at me? Oh my God, what the fuck is that? I just don't get it. Can she see out of that? What's going on? I'm so scared. I'm calling my mom. This is at the school that I was the guest professor at. I'm calling my campus security. No way, she's a professor, right? So those are just some images. I know that we're wrapping up. And with the Red Chador series, like I said, she has traveled all over the world, faced censorship at the Smithsonian, had a moment of beautiful patriotism surrounded by 99 US flags and 99 Salam flags. She's had incredible moments of engagement with all sorts of people. She's traveled to the Memorial Wall, the Vietnam Memorial Wall, which is also a site of trauma for myself. She's also gone to San Francisco, and she's walked amongst many people and tried to intervene the best way she could. And she's gone to Hong Kong to also pay homage to the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong at the time. And really, you can only get away with this kind of protest in Hong Kong at the art fair. At the time, Trump was calling Hillary Clinton nasty woman. And that is, I think, what is so special about the Red Chador is she continues that sort of unapologetic presence that I'm so interested in. But at the same time, it's the use of humor for me, because really she is abiding by Muslim codes of modesty, but also she's red and in sequence. So it's not exactly a quiet color. And the idea here is that, you know, why can't an Orthodox Muslim woman with all of her joy and knowledge and beauty also be ready to go to her own prom, be ready to go to a ball, to an evening experience and dress with such fabulousness. If you followed the work, you also know that in all her fabulousness, she also died. It was an act for me of enforced disappearance in Tel Aviv, where she was taken from me. The original garment was taken from me on my exit out of Palestine through Tel Aviv. And so for 2 years, I would have to do a memorial exhibition, since I had already lined up exhibitions around the world. And so instead, I just decided, again, this is where you have to adapt. I don't have the garment. I'm not interested at the time in remaking it. It was a deep loss. So I created a mourning series, a memorial and mourning rituals combining Islamic and Buddhist moments to honor her life. And I created a newspaper that is in different languages, that is an obituary written by a real journalist and in multiple languages. So this, you would pick up and take for free this newspaper that celebrated her life. She becomes rebirth in 2019, and this time she's no longer alone. And out of the water and the fire of the Hawaii Islands is her rebirth. And Hawaii really celebrates the Anunu, which is the rainbow. And obviously, in order to rebirth a work like this, it has to be epic for me, and it has to be more meaningful than how it began. And so this is really aligning Islamophobia with homophobia. If we're going to want to say that people need to stand up for Muslim people, we also need to stand up for other communities that are also being targeted and ostracized. So this is as much a piece for my own community and the challenges we have within the Islamic community, as well as a much bigger community. And so this work is ongoing, and now she's not alone. She's got a fabulous entourage of different colored chadoras who celebrate her and who she now performs with. Very honored that this work went to Bendigo with under the curation of Noor Shkembi, and then it was last week it closed in Townsville, Gurun Bilbara at Umbrella Contemporary. And I think we're going to open it for Q&A now.
Anida, thank you. I'm standing in for David, who's in Sydney, as you all know. Anida, thank you so much. That was such a generous and what incredible vitality and life I think that you shared with us today on an amazing artistic journey. I'm just going to open it for some, maybe there's time for one or two questions. Do we have anything from the audience? back there. So,
Hi, Nina. You talked about documentation kind of being as a means to extend the work, but I'm also wondering if you find there's anything lost in the act of documentation, or if you find yourself doing performances to make the point of not documenting, and how that augments the work, or particularly augments the performance with the documentation in mind.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think that there are lots of pieces. I haven't talked about it, but one of the most memorable pieces that I have no documentation that lives in people's memory is when I had my first baby and we had to do a show and tell of some of our latest work for the M.F.A program that I was part of. And I decided to do a live pumping of my breasts. And because, you know, when you have a new baby and you're breastfeeding, I am a student and I'm secretly pumping my breasts in the bathroom stall. And now I'm under pressure to do this show and tell, and I was not in the mood. And so I decided to sit on a stool, have some cookies, and manually pump my breast and put it into shot glasses and serve it to the audience. I didn't think people would drink my breast milk, but these are art students. And so there was a line outside the door wanting to drink my breast milk. And then I would meet these people a year later and they'd be like, we know each other because I drink your breast milk. So there are stories from my performances, all of them, whether it's this piece that I have no documentation of, except that it lives in people's memory and when they run into me and they tell me about their encounter with me. And then there are all the stories from all the moments when, as the Red to Door, people come up to me and they're whispering things in my ear, or when I can feel like the different energy of the shake, the utter fear that some of these folks have in this encounter. I have yet to figure out where those anecdotes go other than in these talks. But because I have so many, I feel like I need to write a book, and maybe that's going to be like the next challenge, is like, how do you tell the story of my life through my work and my encounters? And I've been thinking a lot about that, but I think that for the photography and the video, I'll be honest with you, it's because I have to make a living as an artist. You can't do this work just as, okay, here I am, book me. I mean, not even Marina Abramovich does that, you know? So you have to, as an artist, think about that. How do you want to present your work, and how do you want to have longevity as an artist working? Because it's not so easy already as a performance artist, but as a woman and as a mother, it's even more challenging.
thank you so much, Anita. Have we got any other questions? Kate. Hi.
Curious about some of the actions that you engage with the life with people. So you're not representing violence or writing about violence. The act is the act of violence, just as an example being pushed. So again, it's an amazing strategy. And I wonder if you would just talk about why you're interested in that, being in the space about in the performance and the action and the work rather than perhaps representing the company. Can you say that last part? Rather than representing violence, it's the confronting. I'm just really interested in that aspect of your.
Yeah, that's you know, I didn't know that I would be capable of doing that piece. That was a last minute change that I really thought long and hard about what that young Burmese artist must have felt, and how could I not respond as sort of, you know, someone who was older than her, and someone who was coming in there with sets of privileges that she didn't have. And so I just felt like I wanted to take the challenge on for myself to take that abuse, because I felt so bad because we were all in such shock when that happened. It was just like your jaws drop. And we could have easily said, like, shut up, don't do that to her. But I think everybody there was just like, what is happening? We thought everybody was friends, you know? And so I decided that I was going to do something really bold and something maybe that hadn't been done to my body, because I felt like that was the privilege that I had, because I don't think it would have been the same if it was a Burmese woman doing that. Those were Burmese men that were all around me. And so I felt like because I was a foreigner, that gave them more permission to kind of do that, to have that sort of untethered moment of such violence, because it started like, oh, everybody was really nice. And then when they noticed that I was taking this stance and I wasn't falling down, they really came at me. And here's another one that I don't have any documentation of except for that one photo. In fact, my Malaysian friend who was taking the video, we lost the footage. We don't have it. So, you know, all I have is my memory. There's actually a couple Burmese artists that live here now that remember that piece as well. And then when I thought about what happened and the strange empowerment I felt for staying standing, like that bit of energy that I had, like that self-defense lesson was when I was a teenager, when I was in second year of high school, being taught how to not get raped by a physical education teacher. That was my self-defense class. And I remembered those lessons all those years. And I think it's interesting how it resurfaces. And in that moment of that performance, it was an empowering moment for me. I didn't see myself as a victim. And then I would restage that for, you know, with Black Lives Matter and then all the Trump stuff in 2015. And again, you know, it was a different kind of line. It wasn't a circle. It was like a line that I was moving through, but I feel like I can take it, you know, because I set up the parameters of that experiment. So I feel like I was in control.
Anita, I've got a question also following on from that, because I was wondering during the performance when you were talking to us, it's one thing to actually, and then we'll, to be able to get the audience to become complicit and engage in this activity. How did you set them up in the right way for that to happen? Because that's a very important part of the artistic piece as well. Not everyone wants to push you over or want to be seen to be that person.
Right, like the president of the college.
Yeah.
She actually, this is what she did to me. She went like this, and then she hugged me. Okay, so she didn't actually like push me down.
Yeah.
But I also, there is a setup I do when I know I knew that particular audience in the college may not be interested in doing that. And so I asked my students that you can go ahead and push me and it's okay. I am giving you permission because I don't think anybody else will do it unless they see other people doing it.
Yeah.
So I did set up that kind of experiment saying, I think if you model, other people might do it. Yeah.
So fascinating. I think we probably should wrap up. Is there any other last questions from the audience? Yes, Kate. So exciting. It's hard.
So take a lot of time, but I just feel very moved and privileged to have listened to you speak. That in a way, when you started to say you're a fire sign and your daughters aren't a fire sign and your husband's not a fire sign, but at the end with this image and through the whole talk, I felt you're like a guardian for social justice. That you. And I wonder if you see yourself this way, then you become like this guardian who can, like you say, stand up for the person who got pushed, for the LGBT community. Like you're becoming a force that can, of magnitude, great magnitude and power, and you're his guardian of justice. You're like you're my superhero.
Oh,
I mean, thank you for that. I mean, I think that's why, I mean, in the talk on Friday morning at UniMel, I will talk about mythical heroines and this idea of creating these personas that are larger than life, because they are my alter egos. And they are essentially, I mean, when you have 3 daughters, which is what I have, and 3 daughters who are Japanese and Cambodian, we're not going to be the tallest people in the world. We're going to come up against all sorts of things. You know, who knows what's going to happen to me, but I want to leave behind some images for them. And this work is not easy. This work is not easy. And I remember talking to a lot of my colleagues in America who face similar challenges as women of color. You know, in an art world, in an art market that is predominantly white men and white, that it is hard for us. But when we get like, we're not doing this for that white audience. We're actually doing this for like that one child that will stumble onto it, or that one university student that will stumble onto this work and maybe have some kind of change about like what they may see themselves being able to do in the future. That if this person did it, well, maybe they could do it too. You know, so I think that's what's important to understand in this work. I'm doing this because I didn't have these images of these mythical heroines in my upbringing. You know, and so if I could leave that behind so that it impacts other people, for me, that's an important part of what I need to leave behind, because that impacts many other generations. And that's important for me as someone coming from near annihilation.
yeah. I think that's a perfect way to end. Thank you so much, Anita, for incredible talk and generosity.